This week, how important is it for Canada to have a seat on the UN Security Council? Also, how should the federal government handle those anti-pipeline protests? I'm Glenn McGuinness, and this is Outburst.
I think it's important to make sure get everybody in the same room and really have a productive conversation about it.
And that this is all the result of years and years of, well, now we have a name for it, kind of failed attempts at reconciliation.
Somebody's got to work in this country, and if they can't work, the country's going to go down the tubes even further than it is. So
I don't even know which side to take. I couldn't even choose a side.
Anti-pipeline protests have resulted in tensions with the federal government and rail blockage in different parts of the country. The conflict arises from the production of a natural gas pipeline in Wet'suwet'en Traditional Territory in northwestern BC. This situation not only affects Indigenous communities but also farmers trying to get their products to market and has resulted in layoffs in the railway industry. The Prime Minister has indicated enough is enough, but his government is still committed to a reconciliation agenda. But is this sufficient? Our question. How should the federal government handle anti-pipeline protests?
They should listen to the protesters and treat them with respect because it's their land. It's unceded land. It's not ours. It's theirs.
Damn, it's tough, isn't it? There's a lot to consider, and I don't think that the protesters should be seen as people breaking the law and there's quick economic downsides to that. I think it should be a bigger, broader picture, and that this is all the result of years and years of, well, now we have a name for it, kind of failed attempts at reconciliation. And I don't think that broader aspect of the issue is being brought to light. It's just the short-term, immediate downsides to the rails being stopped right now that are fueling people's opinions. And I think those opinions might change if we all had a little bit more knowledge on it. But I think that they aren't talking enough, and from the clips and snippets I've seen, they don't seem all that empathetic. They seem afraid to even start discussions. So maybe handle it more by getting the people at the table right away and really being courageous enough to dig into the bigger problems at hand.
Well, I think it's really important to keep communication lines open with a lot of the First Nations communities and to really make sure that they are communicating with the hereditary councils and also the other councils as well. So I think it's important to make sure get everybody in the same room and really have a productive conversation about it.
That's a really difficult question. I mean, I feel like they should listen to the people, especially when we're talking First Nations people. It's one of those things. Is it really going to benefit everybody? And if it was for the greater good, then sure. But at this point, if people aren't wanting it, then they shouldn't do it.
I mean, everybody who has sympathy for Indigenous people, and they definitely got a raw deal. But at the same time, how much are you allowed to let them get away with when it comes to disrupting everyone else's lives who've got nothing to do with pipelines or any situations like that?
I think it's a very complicated issue. There's a lot for the government to consider. One, the jobs that come from the oil and gas industry, but also, the Indigenous communities that it affects. And we have a long history of not respecting Indigenous rights and treaties. And I think it needs to be handled in a very precise and careful way, because our history with handling those issues it's not good. So we need to pull up our socks and we need to do the work. It's time for us to actually do the work.
I think they need to talk to the First Nations people in BC, and that means probably taking the RCMP away, like making that concession, and then bringing everyone to the table and talk. That's, I feel pretty strongly about that.
We've had some bad experience years ago. I remember in Quebec, and you don't know who's in your protest line and who's doing what. Stopping the freight and travel of freight. That's a big issue. I think they can solve it, but they have to talk about it.
I don't think they can do too much, but to try to mediate with both parties and come to some kind of positive conclusion, because this has only been going on for, forever. He's nothing like his dad was. I'll say that much, dude.
I think the protesters shouldn't be forcibly removed, but I believe that they need to start realizing that this is not the best way of doing it illegally. They need to continue to peacefully protest, not blockade transportation or rail or any of the main infrastructure that the world has or that Canada has.
I mean, as far as the pipeline goes itself, I mean, especially in Saskatchewan, our economy was founded on oil. So it's one of those things that I have a unique perspective growing up around like reserve land and stuff like that too. And so while you have to respect everything, based on what I've been hearing, I can't confirm or deny if it's true. I've heard opinion from both sides. So right now, I think it's up to the provincial government, not the federal government, because they've done enough damage already. They just need to, at the end of the day, sit down, hash it out. If they don't want it, they don't want it. Leave it alone.
My concern is that as it drags on, it becomes counterproductive, and that would be a shame.
I think the federal government should step in and have the police enforce the law.
Probably call in the army and just have them removed. The protests. Somebody's got to work in this country, and if they can't work, the country's going to go down the tubes even further than it is. So I would just have them removed and build the pipeline. Build all pipelines.
I think the government should just let the pipeliners do what they do, and as it goes for the pipeline protesters, I think they should fine them. If they're taking away jobs from working people, if they're blocking off rail lines, and say to hell with them.
Not even going to try. Sorry, I don't even want to try. It's too complicated. It's too messy. I don't even know which side to take. I couldn't even choose a side. Yeah. Anyway, have a good day.
The Prime Minister has also been busy drumming up support for Canada to get a UN Security Council seat. Other countries vying for this position are Ireland and Norway. While some feel a UN Security Council seat will give Canada more leverage internationally, there are some who feel those efforts could be better spent elsewhere, most notably here at home. The vote happens in June, so we took to the streets to ask Canadians if this is something we need, or is it not such a big deal after all? Our question: how important is it for Canada to have a seat on the UN Security Council?
I think it's very important. I think Canada's representation at any board or any level, especially with the UN Security Council, is very important. Privacy is a big part of young people and old people, especially as we become more involved with kind of putting ourselves out there in terms of social media. So yeah, it's very important, and I think Canada should be trying very hard to get that seat.
Not at all.
Why?
Well, I think there's enough going on in this country that we need to keep our energies focused more on here. I mean, we help the world as best we can through agencies, but it really doesn't matter to me. I don't see the benefit.
Not important in the least.
Why?
It just doesn't seem interesting to me. Don't know what it's going to get us. Don't know how. I don't know if that gets us more power on the international stage in some way that I don't understand. I don't have that information.
I think it's really important, honestly. I think we should be there. We always want to be on the front lines of this kind of stuff. We're supposed to be an example for other countries to follow, but we have to be there. You got to be on the front lines. You got to have a seat at the table. Otherwise, how much influence can you really have if you're not at the table?
I'd say it's fairly important.
Why?
Well, if you don't have a seat, you don't have a say, right? Simple as that. Yeah. So I think it's very important. Canada has been a major player of the United Nations for a very long time and has done peacekeeping missions since the 1950s.
Not at all. The UN is a joke. The Security Council is a joke. It gives us nothing. What it does do is put us in a position where we have to vote many times against our closest allies, the United States and Israel. That's a problem for me.
Well, this is only personal, but I think it's extremely important. I think not just for Canada's visibility, but credibility worldwide. We see ourselves as one of the major 7, 8, if you wish, and to have a voice there amplifies our stance. to not have a voice diminishes, and we really need, especially at this time with what's going on globally, Canada needs to stand higher, not lower.
I think very important. I think it's still valid, and I think that if we, think that that board no longer has relevance, there better be something else that, acts as a global voice. So I think it's important, and I think to maintain its relevance, countries like Canada should be definitely part of that discussion in that group.
I think it's very important for Canada to have a seat on the Security Council for the UN. Our security is something that we pride ourselves on, and the more voice or the more seats we hold, I feel like we would have a better chance at keeping our nation secure.
I think it's very important for Canada to have a seat on the Security Council. Of course, it's not up to us, unfortunately, but I think we have really great techniques. I think we have, a very advanced defense, department. So I think that we could contribute a lot to the Security Council in the UN.
I don't even know what that is, frankly. I don't know how much that involves our country's situations as far as voting, for different situations overseas. So overall, not really. I mean, if it's that important, great, let's get it back. But I don't really see how such a small country like Canada gets affected by something like that.
Canada, unlike so many countries, most people have voted either central or left, where other countries are going a different way. So I think it would be good for the world to have Canada's voice in the UN if they are working towards peace and justice, I guess. But so it's also an honor for Canada. So yes, it's a good idea.
Well, I think it is important. It was important years ago, and people can look back to the Pearson years. Canada, including their military, had a very good reputation within the UN. And I think what's going on down south is enough to distress anybody. And North America is a pretty important continent. And our U.S. we're the best neighbors we ever had. So we have to sort of get it together. Let's hope the government down there gets it together too.
It's not the most important thing. It could be of benefit.
To me, it's not a huge thing. I mean, I think it would be good for Canada, but I haven't followed that along enough to know the ins and outs of it.
Pretty important. I think more so than ever, we're in a more globalist society, so I think that we need to have a representation on a global scale, so I think it's very important.
I think it's important. I think it's very important. Why? Because I think we're an important part of the global community.
I don't think it'll affect my day-to-day life, honestly. The economy's still going to keep going the way it's going. At the end of the day, the world's still going to be spinning. If I were to sit down in a room with you and have a beer, not knowing you from a hole in the ground, if I'm a nice guy, you're a nice guy, we're going to get along. And that's kind of the way it is. So for me, as long as everybody gets along and plays nice, it's fine, it's great. If not, and we want to sit here and hole ourselves up and dig ourselves a grave, I think that we're worse off for it.
In a way, it means we'd have more influence. But I also trust the other countries, to keep that balance in check. So to me, that's not where I would focus personally.
It's not all that important. I think he's got more important business to be doing than traipsing all over Africa trying to get a seat on Security Council.
Do you think it affects Canada's prominence in the world to have a seat there or not?
I think he's making Canada look like a bunch of fools live here, to tell you the truth.
When did Kim Campbell become Canada's first female Prime Minister? 1983, 1993, 2003.
93.
93.
83.
Good 2003.
2003?
2003.
Oh, 1993.
It's 1993.
Yeah, that's right back.
The Right Honourable Kim Campbell became Canada's first and only female Prime Minister on June 25th, 1993. Born in Port Alberni, BC, Campbell earned a degree in political science and later a law degree from the University of British Columbia. She was elected as a provincial MLA in 1986 and later ran for federal office in 1988. Campbell would serve in cabinet under Prime Minister Brian Mulroney in various roles, including Minister of Justice and Attorney General, becoming the first woman to hold that role as well. When Mulroney retired from politics in 1993, Campbell became leader of the Progressive Conservative Party and the 19th Prime Minister of Canada. She would only hold the position for 5 months before losing a general election to Jean Chrétien and the Liberal Party. Following her career in politics, Campbell now works as a speaker and consultant on many issues, including leadership, international politics, and gender. One of the election promises by the Trudeau Liberals was to be open, transparent, and consult with Canadians on issues that affect them. But at an age of dissatisfaction with government, and since then, issues like the SNC-Lavalin affair have Canadians wondering how open and transparent their government really is. So we took this topic to the voting public. Our question: how satisfied are you with transparency in the federal government?
Politicians always need to be kept in check about their transparency. So, I mean, I find some things the Liberal government is transparent on, other things not, depending on their priorities and how they want to spin things. So we always need the press, and we always need advocates on the front lines poking at political leaders so that they will keep engaging citizens truly with what's going on.
I don't know if I really have an opinion on that. I think in all leadership, there's a certain amount of transparency, and I think the public at large are asking for more of that. I don't know if it's happening, but I think in every organization there's leadership. There's some things that need to be shared. There's sometimes things don't need to be shared right now for a lot of different reasons. There's always room for more transparency in every relationship, from husband and wife, son and daughter, to government and public, I think.
It seems like transparency with the federal government is a thing that we were constantly complaining about under the Harper government, and yet a lot of the kind of changes and practices that happened under him really seem to have stayed the same under Trudeau. So it's not really clear to me that that problem has been fixed. It's more that it's like we're accepting the same level of lack of transparency.
I think that the federal government has a long way to go when it comes to transparency. I think that there's certainly improvements on transparency. We quickly forget Stephen Harper and the way that he ran government. I think in this day and age, I think that expectations are certainly quite high of transparency. It certainly are for me. So I think that things have improved, but I think there will continue to be gains that need to be made. If federal leaders, want to be respected and want to be trusted in the roles that they're in, there's a certain level of transparency that's required. I don't think we're quite there.
Not very satisfied at all. I think there's a whole lot of information that not being told. A lot of the stuff that we're being told is not entirely correct. And there's a lot of gray matter coming out.
I actually used to volunteer for a transparency NGO and do good governance and anti-corruption work and stuff, and I actually think it's awful. We need to be doing so much more. Canada declines on Transparency International's list of good governance and anti-corruption every year. We could be doing so much more. Especially provincially. Provincial governments are way more exposed to corruption than federal government bureaucracies are, and we need to have way more oversight. So
I'm not.
You don't think they're transparent? Or
No, I don't. No, I don't think they're transparent. Again, because they wait to see how the other countries and people are going to respond before they do anything. I think they do a lot of things behind closed doors, and then just try and feed the public what they think they want to hear.
I wouldn't say I'm not satisfied, because I think that we hide quite a bit of information as far as we're trying to maintain good economic relations with China, and as a result there's a lot of information that we hide. We haven't really talked much about the Uyghur Muslims and what's going on there. We haven't really talked much or really said anything bad about that, because we want to maintain good relations with China. I think that maybe we need to be a little more transparent with our foreign relations and what's going on there. in Canada, I think that domestically we're pretty open and transparent, but as far as foreign relations, I think we could be more transparent with our citizens and let us know what's going on and what we think about other countries and what's happening, holding them to our standards.
They are on some things, but then it always it's unearthed later that they never told us about. So, I think, but maybe on the whole they are, but.
I wouldn't know how to answer that because I've had a lot of conflicting encounters with different departments. So I would say I'm liking more and more some of the issues concerning transparency. And I think it has to do with having more visible women in part, because that is one of our mandates as women, make it more visible.
Terrible, especially for a government that promised they were going to do things differently and open and transparent, and they've been anything but.
Why do you say that for the most part?
Because they've not been open, and every time they have an opportunity to be open and transparent, they don't take that opportunity. They actually do the very opposite. You also look at the ethics violations that this government has had. When asked questions about, you can't get answers from them in the House of Commons during question period. It's like they're not even hearing the question that's asked. They're answering the question that they want to answer rather than the question that's being asked.
Not very satisfied.
Why?
Freedom of information requests take extraordinarily long times to fulfill. And I don't know if you're aware of something. There's something called a corruption perception index. And Canada doesn't rank very high on that list, unfortunately. Yeah.
And what is that?
Sorry?
And what is that, the index?
The index is basically a measure of perceived openness in different countries and perceived corruption. And one of the highest countries is New Zealand. New Zealand, Northern European countries, because they're generally a lot more open with their citizens. It's much easier to get information from the government. Whereas in Canada, it takes forever to get anything. It could take years.
Yeah, I mean, again, I always think the more transparency, the better. So it's hard to tell. I think it's a mixed bag at this point. Some stuff is fine, and then other stuff is just like, I wish you could be a bit more transparent about that. It's, again, to me, the more transparency is always better.
I actually am. Excuse me, compared to other countries, I've visited many countries in the world, and we got one of the best countries, absolutely. And as far as politicians are concerned, I mean, they're cut from a certain mold. Not everybody wants that job. I certainly wouldn't want to be a politician. So good on them to get out there. For the most part, I think they're honest, hardworking, and considering their citizens, the people that vote for them, in support of what their constituents want.
As a young citizen in Ottawa, as a student, I think that there could be room for improvement. I wouldn't say that I'm necessarily satisfied. I think that having open transparency in certain governments as well as certain institutions that I'm a part of would be appreciated, but I understand that their job is pretty difficult, so I'm not sure how much I can comment on that.
Finally, as we're moving further into 2020, this nation has faced some domestic obstacles that have had an effect on many Canadians. But that doesn't mean we can't look on the bright side and look for some optimism in the weeks and months to come. So once again, we took to the streets to ask Canadians what they would like to see this country achieve this year. Our question: what are your hopes for Canada in 2020?
I hope that Canada will continue to be the great country that it is and that I grew up in and fell in love with, the country that I think, is the best country in the world. I think that and my hope is that in 2020, we will work towards a better future, sustainability, and reducing our footprint on the environment. And my hopes are just that as Canadian citizens, we can come together and work to build a better future.
They keep being leaders in the world, because I really think Canada is one of the best places to live. It is. Yeah, I'm a very proud Canadian.
My hopes for Canada would be if they could begin to further their work on sorting out the opioid crisis. That would be really good to see by halfway through the year, towards the end of the year, getting that continuing the good work there and hopefully beginning to remove those substances. And yeah, I think keep going the way it's going. Canada's attracting a lot of British people because we see it as a better way of life. So yeah, don't change what already works. as well, you know.
I'm hoping for the pipeline resolutions, the protests to come to an agreement for everyone that makes it work for every single person and Indigenous groups, as well as the protesters and the anti-climate people as well, to help out as much as possible.
I hope that we start to address social determinants of health and healthcare, and I hope we actually work on true reconciliation with Indigenous people, acknowledge our privilege, and return some of what we've taken back and repair the harms we've done.
Maybe a little bit less hypocrisy from our federal leadership in terms of, saying green and then supporting big oil infrastructure.
Our hopes in Canada for Canada, I think we continue to be a place that people in the world want to come to. I know when I've worked overseas, students would always say, oh my gosh, I would love to come to Canada. I think we have a good reputation. I think our healthcare could use some work. I think we've got some work to go. I think there are some really good environmental things happening around the world. I think there's some really good healthcare things, and there's some initiatives around health and social care. I think some of the Scandinavian countries are doing a lot, maybe better than we are, that we could take a cue from. But all in all, I think we should be proud to be Canadians, and I think we're going in the right direction.
My hopes for Canada in 2020 is that we'll make strong progress and continue to renew our relationship with Indigenous people and preserve our natural heritage.
I'd love to see 2020 the year where we really saw a turnaround in how we as a society address reconciliation on the ground at the grassroots level, but also from the federal government.
I hope that Canada keeps working on the calls to action of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. It's, Justin Trudeau had such good sound bites when he was elected 2 times, but what's going on in Wet'suwet'en right now goes against some of the principles that he espoused. And that's always going to be the test, these wonderful principles of inclusion and listening to people, and then how we actually treat the first people of the land and other racialized and marginalized people. We need to be held account, public leaders, all the time on that, because it's talking out of both sides of their mouths often, I find.
I hope that we can take seriously climate change and address, make the changes we need to ensure that Canada is sustainable and we can avoid, this impending disaster as much as possible.
I hope for Canada is that a lot of the unrest that's happening is going to get settled, and we're going to live to be a little bit more of a peaceful nation as we should be.
Thanks for watching this episode of Outburst on the Cable Public Affairs channel. I'm Glenn McGuinness. If you have any comments about this show or any other show, you can find us on social media. You can also find us on our website at www.cpac.ca. It's your turn to speak up, and we're listening.